Just so that way the live stream people can hear them a little better.
So
would you mind?
Wait,
I just need to clip this on real quick. If you want
to
just clip this on.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically just to get all their sound. And
okay.
That's fine to stay there. And
yes. Okay. So now they're going to do a song.
Okay.
Good. Okay. I'll just clip it back on myself later. So they can hear everything I say. Yep. Good to know. And it doesn't sound good because the mic's like right here. Oh, that's true. I still don't want to You're a grand old father. Stars and Stripes. Sure. So we're on this Stars and Stripes. Stars and Stripes. Stars and Stripes. Stars and Stripes. Okay. You guys ready? All right, here we go. Stars and Stripes.
her all my love. That's all I do. And if you saw my love, you'd love her too. And I love her. She gives me everything, and tenderly the kiss my lover brings, she brings to me, and I love her. A love like ours could never die. As long as I have you near me, near me. Bright are the stars that shine, dark is the sky. I know this love of mine will never die, and I love her. A love like ours could never die. As long as I have you near me, near me. Bright are the stars that shine, dark is the sky. I know this love of mine will never die, and I love her, and I love her, and I love her.
Ready? Here we go. My country, 'tis of thee. Ready?
Hello. Our last piece before the program begins is titled Jenny, and it is reminiscent of young people who once had love and one is lost. So this is words by Ryan Kerr and music by Nick Myers. Again, it's named Jenny.
I would like to begin by asking for another round of applause for Royal High School's Wind Ensemble and of course the Santa Susana Advanced Women's Choir and Abbey Road A Cappella Group for their great beginning. As well as a thanks to the Tiger Squadron for that great flyover you might have seen this morning. My name's John Highbush. I have the honor of being the executive director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Thank you all so much for coming out on this important morning. I'd like to start off today by introducing the Ronald Reagan Marine Corps League Detachment number 597, who will parade the colors. I ask that you please stand for the colors and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem. Parade the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. Please be seated. Before we go further, there's a few people in the audience I'd like to make sure I recognize. First, a special thank you to Lisa Pate and Bevan Abbey for providing today's terrific musical performances, and to Paul DiNobilo and the Washington Artillery of New Orleans for their great reenactments in the courtyard this morning. I'd also like to thank the Naval Mobile Construction Battalion for bringing out their military vehicles to today's events. And I'd like to take a moment as well to recognize someone in our audience today who is actually a guest of today's speaker, and who was also a 6-year prisoner of war during Vietnam. It's an honor to have him with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, former fighter pilot Captain Charlie Plum. Charlie. And of course, a special thank you to all of the veterans in our audience today. We thank you for your honor, your bravery, your dedication to our country and its freedom. We salute every one of you. Yes, please. In 1986, President Reagan said, quote, "Veterans Day gives all Americans a special opportunity to give freely and unselfishly of themselves, even their lives, in defense of our democratic principles has given our great country the security we enjoy today. From Valley Forge to Vietnam, through war and peace, valiant, patriotic Americans have answered the call, serving with honor and fidelity. On this special day, our hearts and thoughts turn to all the nation's veterans. Let us reflect on the great achievements of those whose sacrifices preserved our freedom and our way of life. With a spirit of pride and gratitude, let us recall their heroic accomplishments and thank them for their unselfish devotion to duty. They are indeed worthy of the solemn tribute of a grateful nation. In honor of those men and women, those who are currently fighting, those who are missing, those who have perished, and those who are veterans, may I please ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now to today's program. Our speaker today is Captain Daniel Pedersen. And although his name may not ring a bell for some, the legacy that he left behind in the Navy is definitely something you will recognize. Captain Pedersen entered the Navy as an enlisted man in the Naval Reserve in 1954. He was ordered to flight training in 1956 and became a naval aviator in 1957. After doing a few tours of duty in the 1960s and during a time when American fighter jets were being downed at an unprecedented rate in Vietnam, the United States Navy turned to Lieutenant Commander Pedersen to reverse this dark fortune. On a shoestring budget and with little support, Commander Pedersen picked 8 of the finest fighter pilots to help train a new generation to bend jets like the F-4 Phantom to their will and to learn how to dogfight all over again. In the process, he helped to establish the Navy Fighter Weapons School and became its first director. Today, you know that school as Topgun. What resulted from his efforts was nothing short of a revolution, one that took young American pilots from the crucible of combat training in the California desert to the blistering skies of Vietnam, in the process raising America's Navy combat kill ratio from 2 enemy planes down for every American plane lost to more than 22 to 1. Top Gun emerged not only as an icon of America's military dominance, immortalized by Hollywood, but as a vital institution that would shape the nation's military strategy for generations to come. Captain Pedersen wrote a book about his experiences, and I hope you'll pick up signed copies from our lobby and from our museum store all day today. It's a great read, so I highly recommend that you do. This morning, we get to hear from him directly. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce you to Captain Dan Pedersen. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you. at 84. I need my cheaters here to see. So don't use a speech written like this, but today is so important in my life. Thank you all for coming. Never expected to see so many, but it's the Reagan Library, so I'm not at all disappointed. I'm delighted to see the place full. I'm honored to be speaking this library because of the great president we had, especially on Veterans Day. In looking outside and watching them fly over, I was super happy to see God and the first responders for sparing this library a week ago. I watched it on television, and then I was talking to Melissa, who's a coordinator here for the library, and she told me about 500 goats that annually visit both sides of the mountain and eat off the vegetation. So somebody had a great plan and it worked, and I'm happy. I'd like to dedicate my remarks today, called USAA, the insurance company, before I came, because the question I've always had, and I have, and it's dynamic. People pass, people get out. Well, how many veterans are there in the country? USAA told me a couple days ago that as of that day, there were 18 million of us that had served our country. It is a dynamic number. And I'd like to also dedicate my remarks today to the Brotherhood of Topgun, which lasted 50 years. How many things you know in a government last 50 years? Yeah. And they served the country. Some are veterans. And how many of you realize that they're still flying? Right now, today, in Fallon, Nevada, they're probably flying 50 or 60 missions out of there training new students. Special occasion, Marine Corps birthday yesterday. They never let us forget it. They come right in before us on everything we do. And that's a blessing. 245 years of dedication. So maybe Top Gun isn't so really important anyhow. But the Marine Corps' been around a long time, and it also is a brotherhood. And one of the things I realized at my advanced age, World War I ended on November 11th also today. And so it seems to be a significant date in our history as we move on. The invitation to speak was a wonderful acknowledgement of Top Gun's legacy and what the young bros have done these number of years. We had a reunion in San Diego on May 1st. And that's why the book was written. I put it down there, part of the PR advertising, but those of you can see it. It is a great book. It's amazing it turned out that way. I think there was some divine guidance somewhere helped me write that. It took about 11 months, and had a lot of help. My editor-in-chief sitting down here next to Charlie Plum, and she's not an English teacher, but she does pretty well with me on that. In the 50 years Top Gun's been in existence, we started at Miramar, and I'll tell you why. The book goes into detail on everything I'm going to talk about, but I don't have enough time today to take you on that journey. It's complex, it's personal, it's very human. We haven't killed anybody. We've done exactly what they wanted, and it lasted 50 years. In the reunion we had in San Diego, there were 42 former COs or leaders of Top Gun. 42 in 50 years. These are frontline naval aviator pilots. The majority of them went on to command fleet squadrons, aircraft carriers. One of them, four-star admiral, was Pac Fleet in Hawaii, or was SINCPAC actually moved up. SINCPAC in Hawaii. Name is Bob Willard. Rat Willard was his call sign. And pretty amazing how it all came together. It's a graduate school. It's not the run-of-the-mill things. The reason we were in trouble in Vietnam was we were teaching the same things that politically they wanted teaching. And when we got out there in real combat facing the MiGs, we found out that, wow, what they'd been doing in Second World War in Korea was really what we ought to be doing out here. So we're flying F-4 airplanes. We're working at a level. Everybody thinks when we went in that war, we're about five years into it, and we were losing, as he said in the introduction, 2-1. That's unacceptable. Korea in the World War II, the American naval aviators had always averaged at the end of the war 12-1. So we weren't doing very well. Therein lies the standard of why the school. We had to put together a get well program, and had to do it rapidly because we were dealing in human life. That's something the public, I don't think, understands. The guys in Fallon know it even today. You deal in human life every time you get in that airplane. You're dealing with your own life, which is the principal thing, probably, but equally so in the brotherhood of guys and gals, and we do have women out there now, is you're responsible for your wingman's life, and he's responsible for yours. It has little or nothing to do with rank. If they weren't the best in the best, they wouldn't be out there. The news media we don't let them that near the organization anymore because you can't control what the press is going to write about you. But I promise you today that if they're called on again, every time in the last 50 years they've been called upon, the Brotherhood has risen and won. And we ended up winning the Vietnam War, the air war. And I'll tell you what the figures looked like after Topgun was born and came into fruition, and we got a couple, 3, 4, or 5 classes going and teaching the new tactics. Let me go back for a minute and talk about the book. Took about 11 months to write that beauty. It was really fun. I'm 84 years old, but it was really fun to go back and dig out my 4 logbooks with all my individual flights in them. Those of you who are naval aviators have got logbooks the same. And when you go back, I relived a lot of those flights, and I thought, and in the annotation in those logbooks, it tells who I was flying and what the mission was. And essentially, you figure out where you were that day, what carrier you were on, where you were in combat when we ended up in combat. So it was a lot of work. I've got a library full of memorabilia. Don't know what to do with. But the Brotherhood right now is putting it all together, and I think it's probably all going down to the Carrier Midway in San Diego to the museum. And the boys, 2 of the bros, paid for and remodeled the fighter ready room on Midway. And it's open to the public now. And we're working on putting a Top Gun museum in there, a subset, and all the things we've collected over the years, because their value kind of moves on. But I looked at cruise books, talked to a lot of my friends, talked to 50 years of the 42 former COs, as many as I had time to do. In 11 months, had a great publisher and a good agent. Jim Hornfisher is my agent. He's also an author. He has 4 or 5 bestsellers in New York. They're all Navy historic books he's written, and they're bestsellers in New York. So he was a great advisor, and he actually convinced me to write along with Daryl Gary, who's Condor in the book. He's the youngest of the bros, youngest of the original 8. He's 21 years old. He had made 2 combat cruises. All my 8 boys that I selected were all 2 combat cruise veterans. I'm going to talk about them briefly here in a moment. But they helped with the research. And it was something that I buried myself in. And fortunately, I think it turned out. Hachette in New York is a publisher, and the book is doing very well. And we're waiting on the second Top Gun movie to come out in June 15th. I think it'll hit the theaters. And I hope I'm around and well enough to do a little bit more of the selling of the Navy. I love selling the Navy. I love selling naval aviation. So, and also one other person I'd like to mention about the book. When you read the book, you'll read the appreciation. Barrett Tillman, many of you are friends of Barrett, I'm sure, if you're a Navy historian. Barrett Tillman is a gold standard for anything written about the U.S. Navy. And he kept me honest and on point. And so what you read in there will be factual based on history as I saw it and as Barrett Tillman saw it. I want to emphasize again, I don't think age has a doggone thing to do with solving major problems in our country. I think the young ones, if you put them together with the right motivation, they can do it as well as old wise men sitting in the Pentagon or in Congress. And I'm being opinionated, but that's me. And as I said, we were 5 years into the war. Kill ratio was unacceptable. The war was being dictated on a daily basis by President Johnson and Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense, the whiz kids back in those days. The target list was being selected. What we were allowed to go after the next day was being selected in Washington by those people and sent to us. Interestingly enough, it just came out recently. A general testified that same target list was given to the Swiss government, Swiss embassy in Hanoi, who in turn gave it to the North Vietnamese in hopes that they would move the civilian people out of our target areas for the next day. Well, the Vietnamese, they weren't quite as naive as our people in Washington were, and they moved the Russian missile systems and the AAA into the areas that were our targets for the next day. So anyhow, Beth and I were talking, my wife and I were talking last night at dinner about McNamara and my experiences there. And I had a friend in Denver, a very, very successful man who mentored me and helped me when I got out of the service. And I went to his house, Beth and I went to his house for dinner one night, beautiful place. And there was full of people. We got there kind of late, and beautiful, beautiful surroundings. And he comes up and welcomes me, and name's Carl Williams. He shakes my hand. He said, I got a nice surprise for you. He said, do you want to meet Robert Strange McNamara tonight? He said, he's in the other room with Phyllis Coors, the lady Coors, lovely lady. But they were having dinner together. And I got to say, not only no, but hell no, I don't want to meet him. I'd like to leave you, that's pretty sensitive for a lot of people. I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'll pledge to you, if I have anything to do with it in your spheres of power, never let our government send young people into combat or harm's way or whatever your choice of words, into combat that you don't clearly intend to win. We have to be very careful about that. We stubbed our toe in the last 10, 12 years on occasion. It must be easy to pick the phone up and send this division, or where's the carrier? Send that carrier over there. I'm going to tell you one thing you may not know. Like today, I think that it's the Eisenhower, USS Eisenhower, sitting out in the Persian Gulf. He's been out there a long time. His air wings aboard. They're up supporting the Marine Corps in Afghanistan. You know what flying's like? F-18s, fairly small airplane, single pilot airplane. Strap your butt in one in the morning. They launch you off. Guess where you're going? You're going all the way to Afghanistan, and you're going to support the Marines if they need you. And then you're going to come all the way back. The bad news is you probably got 4 in-flight refuelings. Those flights are averaging 6 hours duration. You couldn't sit there for 6 hours. Those kids are remarkable young naval aviators that are flying those missions. And the last thing on that example, they come back and guess what? The sun set and it's dark. And probably the number one thing you don't like as a naval aviator is night carrier landings. That'll make a Christian out of anybody. Anyhow, when I was doing a warm up here half hour ago or so, I get asked the question, how did such a young guy at 31 years old get to lead such a venture? And I had 2 combat cruises. I'd just come back with the best leader I've ever flown in combat with, Skank Remsen, who's now gone. But he was number one at the point of the spear every single time we had a tough mission together. When you read the book, you'll read about the night in Korea he and I flew in a snowstorm, and he couldn't see the boat, and they couldn't see us to get us back aboard. And Joe Cool, he kept me alive that night, and he got aboard and finally told me what I had to do. We ended up coming around at 40 feet in a Phantom, flying the wake, picking the wake up, and I followed the wake with the lights looking down like this until the LSO cut me into the wires on the carrier. But that's the example of what naval aviation can be like. The book's got a few stories like that, which will make you appreciate the young ones when I tell you a story, 6 hours, refuelings, and you come back aboard. The 8 young guys were very smart, very young. The youngest was 21. They were all a blend of out there. I had done some flying with the Israelis in my recent times, training Israeli pilots in a Phantom, and I learned one thing out from them. When you got a short time fuse to get something done, spread the work out to specific talent, thus the 8 guys. We did it just exactly like that. I have their names here. I can't read them. Well, I can read them all. You'd like to know. Mel Holmes from Oregon. Call signs Rattler. You know why we have call signs in the Navy? We have call signs because on the nose of the airplane, 601 or 106, whatever, but you can't use those in combat. You learn each other's voices, and you hang a name on them, like Mel Holmes was Rattler. I'm known in the book for my statement. He was the best in the world in the F4, myself included. Mel Holmes was the best. When he strapped in that airplane, Mel Holmes became one with the airplane. And that's how you win in combat. You become so comfortable in what you're doing. John Nash, call sign Smash. These world famous guys, particularly now. John Nash passed away a while back, but his call sign Smash was because he, as a test pilot, he had smashed a few airplanes. Jimmy Rulison had a master's degree in electrical engineering. He was brilliant. He had so much energy up in that skull of his, and he took over solving the missile systems and the flight envelopes with the radar and the missile systems. I didn't mention, but we had fired 600 missiles in Vietnam, and less than 10% of them had been effective. So we had to solve that. I had to learn to fly the F4, different than we'd ever flown it. McDonnell Douglas didn't like that very well. You know, we're voiding the warranty on our airplanes. And I said, I actually got a phone call. I got a phone call from St. Louis, and it was one of the big guys that he said, "You're doing things with the F4 you shouldn't be doing. You know, you're going to break them." I said, "You want to go back to war with us? We're all going back to combat within a year, and we got to find a solution to what's going on out there. You know, you can deposit your warranties in your ear." And for a while, I was persona non grata. And afterwards, when the kill ratio went way, way up, I ended up being pretty well thought of by McDonnell. Jerry Sawatsky, big Polish kid, well built. He played linebacker for Bear Bryant at Alabama. And great teacher, lecture up here. You know, you really wanted to pay attention to Sawat because he would give you what if you didn't. And that was my 4 pilots. J.C. Smith was the backseater, the senior backseater. J.C. shot down the first MiG of the Vietnam War, and he's probably the best communicator with students. If I had a problem child with one of the students, I put J.C. in with him as a backseater, and the problem would go away in a couple flights. So they're really talented. Steve Smith lives in San Diego. Administration, super backseater, tough in combat, and also, if he'd ever been prosecuted, he'd have been convicted as a felon for some of the stuff. I'm going to tell you, I tell about it in the book, some of the stuff we did. You know, when they made us, when they gave me the assignment and I assigned the guys, we had nothing. He just said, "Don't kill anybody. Don't wreck my airplanes." We had to borrow airplanes. He said, "Don't wreck the airplanes and don't kill anybody. And oh, by the way, I expect you to have a graduate school up and ready to go in 60 days. And I think I was getting sandbagged, Charlie. But, you know, too good a job to turn down. So, Jimmy Lang, I'm going to tell you about Steve Smith in a minute. It'll just break you up. Listen to it. Jimmy Lang, been on the ground, been shot down a MiG in Vietnam. Young guy, devout Catholic. To this day, he's absolutely every day goes to church Catholic. But a very quiet, handsome guy. very much a family man. And he had been shot down twice in Vietnam, and we rescued him and brought him out of the jungle both times. In fact, John Nash, Smash, stayed with him when he was shot down to see that he got out, and the Navy saw fit to give John Nash a Silver Star. Nice decoration. Second to Navy Cross. Daryl Gary, those of you who don't know him should know him. He's phenomenal. He was a backseater initially. Young kids, just out of college, out of flight training, 2 combat cruises as a backseater. He was so very good as an instructor, student, movie star, good looking. I think my wife liked him pretty much. But he's really a handsome guy and smart. Today, you wouldn't believe me if I told you all the things he's done since he got out. While he was still in the Navy, we had some A4s, little A4 aggressor airplanes, and we used those as adversary, simulate the Russian airplanes, fight the students with them. And I'd come back in flying one, and I'd look over, and the refueling place was a big drive-through for the jets. And here he'd be sitting in the front seat of one of these airplanes. Now, you gotta remember, he's a backseater, but he's in the front seat. He had conned 2 of the pilots. He had Sawatsky and Nash convinced that they could fly it from the back seat, so let him sit in the front. And he learned to be a naval aviator, and he came to me at the latter time before I left that Topgun, came to me and he said, I want to become a naval aviator. No more backseat time. Nothing wrong with it, but I want to go to flight training. So I was able to do it based on his performance and his combat record. He aced. He was #1 in Pensacola, #1 through advanced training, and is a world-class pilot. He still is right there behind me in everything I do. We just formed the Top Gun Association in San Diego. We've got 700 members now. And they're all guys that have taught or been associated with Top Gun. So let's see. And then Steve Smith found the last guy was a spook. One of the ideas I wanted was, okay, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do it once and forget about it. We're going to do it, and it's going to be a cumulative thing. It's going on year after year. And the way to do that is to become central repository for tactical aviation. So I found Steve Smith actually found him. We found an intelligence-trained young officer and brought him in. His call sign was Spook, and he was badly abused by all the pilots. But the intelligence guy, there's kind of almost an oxymoron being called Spook. But he did that. Top Gun at Fallon has the most beautiful tactical library on fighter aviation in the world, and it grows every day. And the guys are involved. The guys up there today are involved in keeping it alive, staying up to date with new airplanes, new weapons, and also, one thing I learned, you got to know the enemy as well as you know yourself. And that's part of the repository up at Fallon. And they're still teaching, and they're far better than we were. I'm not sure they were better in the air, but academically, they're teaching a lot of things that are pretty advanced. How we change the tactics and so forth is in the book. It worked. The McDonnell Douglas airplane destroys MiGs very well if you know what you're doing with it. You'll have to read the book. I don't have time to go through it. For graduation, the day before graduation of the first class, I decided to take them up to Area 51, Dreamland, up in Nevada. There was a time I couldn't even say that word, but now you can. And so I briefed the guys, took my wingman at JC in my back seat, and I said, I want the 4 students with me, fly wing on me. We're coming out of Miramar. We're going to hit a tanker. We're going to refuel, and I'm going to take you out for some fun. Well, I took them to Area 51. I took them up through Groom Lake, and here come 2 of VX-4's really red-hot test pilots flying Russian MiGs. I'd been up there and flown the Russian airplanes myself. I got about 150 hours in Russian airplanes. And you say, why would you do that? Well, you got to know the enemy as well as you know your own business. And if you're going to design new tactics, which was what we did, you better make sure that you know the MiGs as well as yourself. So we go smoking into the Area 51, and here come 2 MiGs down through the lake bed. And the young students saw those MiGs, and the fight was on, and they won. The kids won that day. They used the new tactics. And we went back to Miramar, to the old club, and got very smashed. And that's real naval aviation. It's hard, serious work. Again, I want to leave you with these guys are very professional in what they do. Think about some of you are teachers. Think about teaching at graduate level day in and day out in a dynamic area. It's hard work, but it did work. After I took them up there and they went back out the fleet, class 2, 3, 4 went on, and it's defined in the book well. The kill ratio went from 2-to-1 to 24-to-1 at the end of the war. From the day Topgun started work to the end of the Vietnam War, we took it up to 24-to-1. That means we got 24 enemy for every one of us that got it. Now, I've been going a long time. I'm probably running out of time. Talk a little bit about the book. I've had a great opportunity I never knew about to go speak. Everywhere I go, I speak to civilian groups. One of the things when you get your books, or those who have, reread the foreword again. The foreword was written by Condor, Darrell Gary, the young one in the group of bros. The criteria or standards that we used to select the people who become instructors at Topgun is defined in there. I found that same criteria fits commercial applications pretty well. I end up speaking to commercial organizations. There's a lady here somewhere, Danette Bewley, who's the president and CEO of the Tucson International Airport. Her family, her dad was a naval aviator. Where's Danny at? Somewhere. Oh, she's back there, back under the pictures. If you get a chance to say hello to them. She used the standards in a lot of things she does in commercial business. I spoke at Charleston, the USS Hornet, for Jimmy Flatley. All the docents, marvelous time. Ran into about 325 up on Hornet in the Bay Area in Alameda. Beautiful ship, the old Hornet Aircraft Carrier Museum. It really needs to go over on the waterfront in San Francisco. But again, politics has prevented that. Midway, we had our reunion in San Diego. That was about 600 veterans. Everywhere I've been, I run into shipmates and Marines who have served. And it's just been just been marvelous. First of all, I've come to the conclusion that we represent a very quiet but very large and powerful contingent of society. And just watching and waiting, we always will be and should be subservient to Washington, the political arm of the country. Military should stay subservient. But somehow the Washington, whether it be elected politicians or anybody, they should be up to the task to taking care of the military properly. Instead of buying overly expensive, profit-motivated airplanes and weapons, and then we get to go out and test them in wartime like we did in Vietnam. That just shouldn't happen in this country anymore. First and foremost, I believe our veterans are a proven entity of total loyalty, patriotism in our America, its Constitution, and American way of life. If you watch the TV every day, you wouldn't believe that. But we're the quiet, strong group of people that are out there. And I went back and as I was preparing my remarks, thinking about it. 1965, wasn't it? We were having riots in colleges while I was out fighting a war. That too changed. They got integrated into society. They got married. Things change in a country. Just don't change veterans. Heroes is a misused word in the press, and particularly on TV. I reserve the term heroes for Medal of Honor winners, Gold Star mothers, those killed in action. I had dinner in my travels, had dinner with 3 Medal of Honor winners on 3 different occasions, Beth and I did. And amputees, guy actually, I was amazed at the dexterity of him eating. And that's the toast of medicine, how great they become. But those are the real heroes, the guys who have done it. The rest of us are and should be always patriots. You kind of stole my thunder, but I wanted you all tonight to meet Charlie Plum. Charlie Plum is both. He doesn't like being called a hero, but he's as patriotic. 203 days in captivity, 6 years of his young life, F4 driver with us, shot down just before. Shot down incidentally. When I read the book, Charlie, I was appalled to find out that it was shot down by a Russian-Soviet missile in North Vietnam. That shouldn't happen either, if it can be avoided. But Charlie Plum, shake his hand. He's a great friend. Beth and I are going to have dinner tonight. He's spoken at this podium, I think, before. He's a very gifted speaker and a true naval aviator. So, Charlie, thank you for coming. I really have to wrap this up. I'm getting too long. But in my travels, I've been to the Arizona Memorial many times, and the Arlington Cemetery, the new Miramar National Cemetery. I've seen the Vietnam Wall and cried. And it's serious business what's happening to our country now. One of the ways I know we can change it, Charlie does it, I do it, is we can mentor people that we meet every day. I can talk to you and put the Billy Graham on you if I want, try and teach you. realize how really good your military is. And I speak for Naval Aviation. They are good. They will be there if needed. And mentor people. I'd leave you with a positive vision of America through my old Top Gun eyes, 50 years. It's a free country. This country, for those of you who haven't seen it like us naval aviators do, it is so incredibly beautiful from shore to shore. You got to visualize being at 48,000 feet on a clear day with a bubble canopy, take off out of Miramar and fly to Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. It is so beautiful, this country. It's so much open space. So many great people live here. I got to tell you about the most beautiful night I ever had flying. 2 days before Christmas, absolutely pristine, clear night. I took off out of Salt Lake City in a Phantom by myself. And as I was approaching Las Vegas, coming back to Miramar, I asked the traffic controller, I said, anybody above me? And he said, no. You can go on up as high as you want, and you can go to, he said, just don't sonic boom Las Vegas. And so I cruised the big Phantom up, got up to 50,000 feet. After I crossed over Las Vegas, I was up there, turned down the lights in the cockpit, the stars, you could reach out and touch them. I looked around outside. You could see Yuma, you could see the lights in San Diego, see the lights in the glow, Los Angeles with the mountains holding back. Look at Santa Barbara, looked up the coast, San Francisco. Look in the mirror and see Vegas. Beautiful nights. That's what's flying like. That's what flying can be like. It's not all shoot 'em up stuff and war. This is God's country we live in. I've been everywhere in the world, I think, except for a couple, and they'd keep me if they could get me, but I won't go there. So I want you all to thank God for this wonderful birthplace that we live in. My favorite song in the world, when I'm in this mood, is Born Free. The song Born Free. Pretty good song, huh? Yeah. There are no atheists in naval aviation. None. Particularly if you're a Knight Carolina qualified. I want God to bless each of you, this beautiful library for a great president. I think we all ought to mentor as many as we can and get behind what's going on in Washington right now and help see. It'd be amazing to me to see what we could do with some support for the current president. Thank you all. God bless.
You know, Captain Pedersen said to me, man, I hope it wasn't too long. I have to tell you, it was not long enough, Captain. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now it is time for my favorite part of the program, where we recognize all of you who are here today representing the different branches of the military. Our orchestra will be performing a service medley. When you hear your branch's song, please stand so that we can salute you. In addition, if you are a family member here representing a member of the military, please stand in their place when their branch of song is played so we can remember everyone who has participated or sacrificed in protecting our country's freedom.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence loud and strong. 2, 3, 4, hut, 2, 3, 4. Wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, land and sea. First we fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of the United States Marine. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through howling gale and shot and shell to win the victory. Semper Paratus is our God, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready, do or die. High Costa, we fight for you. Navy. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to college shores, we sail at break of day, 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 day through. Our last night on shore, hail to the farm. Until we meet once more, he's wishing you happy voyage home. Air Force. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. At a boys, give her the gun. Down we dive, spouting our flame from under. Off with one terrible roar. We live in vain or go down in flame, for nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force. America, America, God shed His grace on thee. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life.
Just a reminder to you all that all veterans and active members of the military receive free admission to the museum and library all day. We welcome all of you. Thank you all for coming to be with us today. We